to deliver in Afghanistan, and that may have its roots in our history, and that we don't embrace our population in the way it should be embraced in quotation marks now. And that brings me to the point there's a certain romanticism when it comes to funding. That's somehow highly approved. There's also a certain nostalgia in a way when as long as we can rule out any question of combat elements and other things. Nevertheless, we are in combats. Our mandate allows that. And my point always is that we have to be much more clearer. We have to be much more open to the German public. And my experience is as a parliamentarian that the clearer we speak to the people, the more they understand necessities we have to decide upon. And so that's actually the strategy we have to use now with the next 2 years. It will be hard because we come into an election year, and you know how let's say brachial the opposition is playing the card, and it will be a big task. But nevertheless, I expect that you will also see a step-by-step expansion of the things Germany is doing in Afghanistan.
Lauren Cook from AFP. A question for the Minister, if I may. It seems you said you're optimistic that you're going to get the troop commitments that you need in one form or another in the south. But then again, Afghanistan's going to need a whole lot more time to develop and possibly keep people in the south doing the same job. Is it time to think about a rotation down there to keep 4 combat troops so that you can sustain over a longer period of time?
Well, a rotation in. And, 1,000 troops, which was identified in the Manley panel's report, is really seen as a minimum. It will essentially double our maneuver battalion capability. I think what you're also going to see simultaneously is the addition of more Afghan troops, more A&A forces. And other countries as well, I think, over the ensuing time period are also going to have to recognize, and I think do recognize, that Kandahar province is the valve that the Taliban are using to bring in their insurgents' reinforcements because of the recruitment proximity to some of the refugee camps in Pakistan. This is the source. This is the primary epicenter. If you have, not to be too crude about it, but if you have termites in your house, you find the nest. And we have to, at some point in time, address the source of the Taliban insurgency. And it is, of course, also beyond just Afghans. The Taliban are not comprised solely of Afghans. There are other countries that contribute. So we're, back to your initial question, we feel that 1,000 troops is a minimum. It's a contingency for Canada. We just took a vote in our Parliament. February 09 is the date in which we've essentially set. It's an artificial timeline, but we're saying we need 1,000 troops in Kandahar by that date. And I'm confident we will have that.
Nick Fiorenza, Jane's Defense Weekly. Minister MacKay, the 1,000 troops, the minimum 1,000 troops, do you expect countries in Bucharest to actually say we'll be providing a battalion or more than one country to do that? And I mean, from what I understand, the combined joint statement of requirements is still not filled. I mean, supposedly that was filled in Riga. Do you expect that to be filled in Bucharest?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, logistically, we would prefer to have one partner in that regard, but as we've seen with the Dutch, it is often a number of countries who come together. There are essentially 8 countries now operating out of the Kandahar airfield, and others we feel will be joining. The Germans, for example, have contributed Tornado aircraft. There's other aircraft, particularly helicopter, that we also require, and UAVs. So there's equipment capabilities that we feel are going to help us specifically address the challenges that NATO faces on the type of insurgency, IEDs and suicide bombs. And, this is another issue, I think, that will require some greater discussion, if not at this upcoming summit in Bucharest, because there is a very busy agenda. But that is the subject of training overall. And Bob Gates touched upon this, and some perhaps we're a bit taken aback, but how NATO addresses the challenges of insurgency and the type of overall training that we need to embark upon as an international community, because this type of insurgency is not going to be with us for a short time. I expect that this is going to be a very long and abiding challenge that we're going to have to address. To your broader question, again, I expect that there'll be some progress made, incremental though it may be, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to keep that subject on the agenda beyond Bucharest until we get to the point where we have a comprehensive political military strategy going forward, in addition to the larger questions of NATO's future.
If I may add a sentence from a German perspective, just on your question as well. Germany will bring in 2 more planes for airlifts all over Afghanistan. It's not limited to the north. I think that's also good to know. And we will expand. We have 11 signalers already in the south, and we will expand them up to 40. And also, it's a tiny contribution, but it is a contribution also to those things. And just to add what you've said before. Thank you.
Paul Gooses, Belgian news agency. What's your comment on the fact that the European ministers of foreign affairs discussed last Thursday on the European Council about the necessity to have a clear exit strategy for Afghanistan?
Was that a question to me? To whom soever. As I said before on the panel, I think the perspective we have in Germany right now is that the exit strategy is tightly connected to the success we have in the training of the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police. But it's not the only point that has to be successful at the end of the day. Germany, as such, doesn't see any time limits at the moment, although we have to prolong our mandate every year. But this is just it's part of our law. But we don't play with dates at the moment. And so we still see it as a long-term perspective, but we try to communicate the exit strategy in connection of successful security structures in Afghanistan.
I would just add very briefly to that. From a Canadian perspective, we've extended the military mission to 2011 as a result of our consultation, our vote taken in Parliament. But I would borrow from my colleagues' words that it is more the focus of a success strategy, and to that I think we need to very often go back to the Afghanistan Compact that was signed in London. 60 countries there. There are some very instructive benchmarks found in that document, and I think we need to revisit quite frequently how we're doing on some of those development and reconstruction benchmarks and goals. Exit strategies and the talk of the end dates are useful very often for domestic political consumption. But I think we're going to have to come to grips with the fact that this is going to take a consistent, long-term international effort. And I suspect we'll be having another conference not too far off in the future to renew and to look at in more depth what has been accomplished vis-a-vis that Afghanistan Compact and recommit to that overall development effort.
Mr. Atmar, do you have a perspective on
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with what the 2 previous speakers said. Number one, it will have to be technically sound. That exit strategy will have to be clearly informed on the need as to what is going to sustain Afghanistan as a secure, democratic, and prosperous country, not to be a threat to the global security. Now, no exit strategy will do any justice if it is not informed on those needs. As I said during this session, that the international community needs to know that it has succeeded in achieving the first objective, which was to transform Afghanistan from a threat to global security to an asset for global harmonization, alliances of civilization and regional peace and development. The second challenge now is to make sure that Afghanistan is sustained. And this is going to take long-term investment and patience and engagement with Afghanistan. Talking immaturely about exit strategy will only give a morale boost to the terrorists who would think that the international community is now faltering here and that there is a crack in its commitment to Afghanistan. For all of us to honor the bravery and the sacrifices of the brave men and women in uniform of the international community in Afghanistan, we really need to stay the course, and that should not be affected by the untimely talk about an exit strategy.
Last question, Mark.
I'm Mark John from Reuters. Just two quick follow-up points for Minister MacKay on those two points. You make clear it's going to be a long-term international effort. How do you better sell the mission to the Canadian public to make sure they remain on board during that long period of time? Secondly, the discussions about getting these 1,000 troops for the south of Afghanistan. There's been some discussion. It might have been the French, or possibly the French go east and they relieve the US to go to Kandahar. Just to be clear, do you have a preference for which ally comes and helps you in Kandahar?
Well, I would say that, just to answer your last question first, I would say the preference is that it is a single contribution as opposed to bits and bobs, and I say that with the greatest respect. But for logistics and strategic military purposes, it's better to have a partner that is coming from a single country. Keeping in mind that it's an ISAF mission, and we are trying to coordinate that effort to the best of our ability. But in Kandahar province, whether it's American, whether it's British, whether it's French, and there are British troops there, I would note, the main point is we need that type of heft right now, given the kinetic activity on the ground, given the proximity to the Pakistan border. And I don't believe, frankly, that a final decision has been taken by the French. I believe President Sarkozy has been speaking to many of the world leaders, Prime Minister Brown, Prime Minister Harper in Canada, the President of the United States. So there have been some very high-level discussions on this subject, and I would anticipate a decision fairly soon, if not just prior to Bucharest, then certainly at the summit itself. Oh, just I guess quickly on your how do we translate some of the success or the progress to Canadians. We've had a very involved and widely broadcast debate leading up to this vote that took place last week. I think you're seeing greater informed media coverage, if I might say so, as to the overall picture in Afghanistan, albeit challenging in certain areas. As we just talked about on the panel, there has been tremendous progress. We had visits from 6 female members of parliament, Afghan members of parliament. I think that made a very clear impression on the minds of Canadians that those are the type of things that we're fighting for in that country. And hearing from our international partners, too, makes a very strong impression. Canadians are very multinational, multilateral in our outlook, and they very much need to have that message reinforced, that it's a NATO mission, that it's a UN-backed mission, that there are 60 countries with us on the development side, 40 on the military mission, and that we are improving the lives of Afghans and reaching that tipping point where it's going to be a sustainable, self-sustaining, vibrant country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.